So welcome to Tallulah, Merle, to my London townhouse this afternoon, this Sunday afternoon. How are you today?
Great. And it's beautiful in here. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this for several months now. We actually met when you did your Case for Hope in the Age of AI talk in Camden in London
Yep.
in August last year, a much warmer, sunnier day than it is now.
Yeah. Yep.
And I really wanted you to have a chance to dig more into some of those topics and to talk to us more about that. And in particular, I know in a couple of months, you've got a book coming out as well on the same theme.
Yeah, it's kind of taken on a life of its own, starting with the talks. And now there's always more I wanted to say. And that, even before this, we're just riffing and can't stop on any given topic. So a book can be a good format for that.
Yeah, a book. So I do some writing as well. And I think a book is a really good way to distill some deep thinking in a single topic or a single area.
Yeah.
I think today, judging from the prep talk that we did, that we'll be talking very widely.
Very widely.
Indeed. Let's see. We might even veer off of the AI topic a little bit as well. So one of the things that struck me during the Camden talk was that you are not shy of tackling the drawbacks to AI. You are very much, my perception is that you are very much an optimist about AI.
Yeah.
You're making a case for hope, which is a positive thing to do, but you were also keen to look at some of the drawbacks. So we'll dig into some of that as well today. But why did you choose that title, The Case for Hope?
Yeah, I was very intentional with the language. And obviously the two keywords there are case and hope. Case meaning, evidence and fact-based look at a certain topic, which I wanted to be grounded in truth and in reality. And as you say, the reality is that there are very many risks and very many unknowns and uncertainties with where we are in this moment with the technology. So I wanted to be very lucid about that because I agree with them. I mean, I'd be the first to admit that, we're early on and there's a lot still to address. But hope, the definition I love for the word hope is the belief that something good may happen. Which is not kind of techno-optimism or blind positivity or zeal or enthusiasm. It's just the belief something good may happen. It's like this sliver of openness and curiosity that things could go drastically well, which happens to be my conviction. And I think that is very important because at the end of the day, it's a choice in terms of how we look at or approach this technology, which is already here and here to stay. And our collective focus is very powerful. So if we're not choosing hope, if we're really in the fear-based narrative, of which there is a lot right now, right? Kind of the news tends to lean in that direction. We're much more likely to end up in those scenarios. And I talk about, hyperstition and all these other things we can get into and how that's kind of a proven phenomenon. But so hope is not just a nice to have. I think it's a need to have.
Yeah, it sounds essential. So just so people know, we both have a business background in AI, a technology background partly, a consultancy background indeed, going way back. So perhaps slightly more on my side, I'm very much more of a scientific technology brain coming into this kind of thing. Maybe now in recent years, moving more towards the humanist angle and the spiritual side of it and the less technology side of it. We do talk a lot in the news and so on about the mechanics of AI and the enablers of AI, and perhaps not enough on what do we actually want from it? What could it actually do that will help us?
Yeah. The dialogue is very focused on the tech and you go to these conferences and it's all genius technical builders talking about deep technical topics. But that's very, it excludes then a huge swathe of the population that can't understand that technical language. And yet it's a technology that's going to impact everyone's lives. So I really care about bridging the two and translating and articulating in a way that feels accessible to bring everyone along. And yes, this humanist side, I consider myself a humanist first and then happen to spend my career in the world of tech over a decade plus. But I think that that's core. It's like, what future are we moving into? And how do we ensure it's a flourishing human future? And,
And that's one reason I really particularly wanted to talk to you, was because I think traditionally we might have had an opposite view of this. So I'm very much more happy with the tech
Yeah.
I just described myself as an introvert who is having to work up the energy for a conversation like this. Whereas this is your natural habitat in a way, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like that's the case. So I've said previously that it feels like you're an all-rounder who could pretty much do anything. We'll talk maybe later about the musical side, about your singing, and maybe about yoga as well. But I recall, you look back in history, that science and the arts were less separate than we seem to want them to be these days. Natural sciences, even that word makes you think less of science and nature being opposites or something different.
Yeah.
And from your recent talks and the book that's coming up, it feels like you're in favor of blending and merging and being more holistic with how we approach these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's true. We've gotten very compartmentalized as a society, the way we operate in society. We have our home life, which is separate from where we work in terms of space and place, and also how we show up to that environment. And then we have nature as a separate thing that we go to, right? Like we go to the mountains or we go be in the water, right? But it's not, we have to take ourselves there. It's not naturally accessible otherwise. And then, or communal gathering happens separately, or music or arts, when we pursue them, happens separately in separate areas. So we have become very compartmentalized. And we didn't always operate that way. I talk a lot about the eras of human life on Earth and how we used to be hunter-gatherers, where we spent all our time in subsistence activity, but where things happened was all kind of within mainly tribal structures and environment. But the work, the play, the celebration, the rituals, the interaction, all happened locally. And then we became agrarians and then industrialists with the rise of mass manufacturing and working in factories. And now here we are in this information era. But I see definitely things have become more compartmentalized over time.
That is how the world feels at the moment. It has felt that way for most of my career, as we are talking about work and to a business audience here. But we're trying to bring in the holistic view. Maybe let's tackle some of the slightly more negative thoughts that are out there. You talk about the AI age and that we're at the start of something new. We've also talked previously about, other devices, inventions that might be classified in that way, like the internet, the smartphone, even the calculator and the printing press going way back.
Yeah.
They've all of them disrupted business and indeed everyday life.
Yeah.
But do you think we are at the start of something new, an AI age?
Yeah, I don't know. I definitely would say we're in the cusp of a new era of human life on Earth. I don't know whether I think that technology will be a very transformative force moving into that. But as I say, so we were just talking about the eras of human evolution and hunter-gatherer, agrarian, industrial, and then this information era we're in now, where we've continued the 9-to-5 Fordian way of working. But many of us, not all, but many of us, especially if we're in services space, which is I think 50% of people in the US at least, it's in kind of now skyscrapers and behind screens, right? Which is sort of a dystopian concept in and of itself, and a very modern definition of work that arguably is not very good for us physically or mentally. And so we're moving into something different. And AI does arrive as the great disruptor. And it feels very scary, right? And it's because the same way that those hunter-gatherers would look at the way we work and operate today, and they could never have fathomed that, right? Like they could never have fathomed a smartphone, or like that I can be across the world from you on a Zoom call looking at your face. So again, we're sitting on the cusp of this shift where we can't fathom what comes next. And when you can't fathom, your amygdala turns on and your brain goes, I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely terrified. It's very human and natural to feel fear, but it doesn't mean that what's to come is necessarily negative. And I would argue that a lot of the dystopia we fear is actually the ways we work and operate today, and that there's an opportunity to return to more human ways of being and doing and interacting. And I explore that then in depth in the book, and maybe we'll dive into it. But that is my conviction. I feel very strongly about that.
And that conviction does indeed come across. And I think that's why you're such a great speaker on these topics, is because you've got that technology understanding, that business background, but you are looking for new ways to do things. I think And it's fair enough, maybe when people start playing around with AI. I've seen the trend this week for a new style of cartoon version of ourselves that people are putting around on social networks,
Okay.
where you get it to make it look like you're at work and you look kind of very flattering and so on. And it's kind of fun, silly things, memes,
Right.
you might call them in a way. And it's a good way to play and to learn and things. But really, we're just looking through our lens of, how do we do things today, and how can AI help me? And we seem to be picking the easiest and most trivial little things to do, like maybe it can create PowerPoint slides for me. Maybe it can write my emails. That doesn't strike me as very ambitious. You've got a bigger ambition for that, haven't you? I think you're thinking of new ways to do things and new ways to live even.
Yeah, I think I'm, and there are some of us who we can envision, right? We can envision what comes next and how we might interface with the technology, with the natural world, with each other as a result of what the technology will do. And it's sort of, most of the people building right now in AI, they're like genius technology, they're very technical people, they're problem solvers, they're engineers, which is incredible. And we need that, but they're not always the people who have, their zone of genius is not the visioning. So I think, and similar to the internet, I read this really interesting paper that was published in the 90s at the dawn of the internet. And they were trying to hypothesize what we would use the internet for. And it's so funny to read it because there's certain things that it got right. They were like, okay, we're going to correspond electronically. Like the internet will allow us to communicate digitally, virtually. We'll also be able to look up and recall information much more quickly, like an online library, right? But they could never have guessed. And certainly the paper says nothing about like social media, online communities or engagement, nothing about, as I said, Zoom calls or connecting across the world using the internet, well, in the same visual way, or e-commerce, like shopping online or, transacting online. I mean, they had no clue about any of that. So right now we're in a similar early moment in AI, and there are these early use cases, you say, that feel kind of almost trivial or kind of banal, but we're just early on. We're just experimenting. And there will be less than ideal use cases, the same way the internet was much of it was dark web and, sexually explicit content and pop up. There will be shadow AI usage because we're very early on. But I don't think that means the trajectory will continue that way into the future.
So we've both worked in technology for years and years, in my case, decades.
You're not that old.
Well, thank you for saying that. But we both know that it feels like we're at the start of AI as an age, as a journey.
Yeah.
But the guys started researching this topic after the war in the 1950s. And their best guess or their best way of labeling what they were working on was to call it artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I think where we are today is a long way short of intelligence. But I wondered, what were your thoughts on what is intelligence, and are we calling it the right things?
Yeah, well, exactly. So it's in many ways the technology is as old as the internet because it dates back to the 50s, the genesis of Alan Turing posing the question, can machines think, or what if they were intelligent and could think? And then at the Dartmouth conference, the term was coined later in 56 or something. Don't quote me on that. But so it's had all this it's evolved through all these different modalities, early neural networks through to initial kind of commercial use case and things over time. But we've reached this inflection point. It's kind of come of age because we've reached a point with compute capability that we're, it's almost making good on its promise in a way. So it's become powerful. The term is a super interesting one. And in the book, I have this whole chapter because one of the fears with AI is that we've developed an artificial intelligence, so we will become less intelligent. Like AI is making us dumb because we're offloading cognition to a tool that can do it better and faster in many ways. And so my exploration then becomes, okay, well, what is intelligence though? And what is human intelligence? And I would argue we've over-indexed on associating intelligence with cognition, like what our brain can do, right? And we talk about IQ, which for me is a very limited, don't get me started on IQ. I think there's many issues with it, but because we're in this information era, we're very, we operate most of the time from, we're always in our heads using our brains. And it's because that form of intelligence was our competitive advantage as a species, right? Like we
It was.
developed this superior intelligence, which allowed us to then innovate and build all these things. So it makes sense we've gone that direction, but it's almost swung way too far and taken us out of touch with other forms of human intelligence. And so I explore 3 in the book, but I honestly think a second book could be about lost intelligences or like waylaid forms of human intelligence, such as our ecological intelligence. So
Okay.
talk about that, like our connection with the land that we used to have and how closely we lived on and with the land, our understanding of seasons and plants, flora and fauna, and how to coexist with them and use them for our own health. So all these sorts of things. Our somatic intelligence, which is our connection with our physical bodies, and the wisdom of the soma, all
Yep.
this, our emotions, our nervous system, how to regulate it, and kind of our connection with that, because most of us are very sedentary and sit all day, and then
I know I am.
we all are.
Yeah.
But that's a crisis in its own right, to be honest, how much we sit. Anyway, and then the third is communal or collective intelligence, which is, the way that we lived and operated and worked within communities, and that we inherently knew how to cooperate. We also processed, we regulated ourselves collectively, we grieved together, we celebrated together, and that was the lifeblood of how we don't do that anymore. It's actually swung very much into individualism. And so there's an opportunity now to return to other forms and definitions of intelligence because we're offloading cognition to a tool that can do better. And I think that's deeply hopeful in its own right.
I agree. And I love that idea that it's the technology that will make us more human in the end, that it's not.
Totally.
Some people may be thinking of robots and that kind of science fiction kind of way of looking at things. But you talk much more about, are there things that we would like to do more of? Face-to-face gatherings, meeting each other, getting out and about, being active in particular. You talked about a sedentary lifestyle, which we're all guilty of. Does this give us more leisure time? Does it? And these are the hopeful things that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and that's why I had to write a whole book about it, because I think that there's so much opportunity and potential with this technology to move into a much more hopeful and flourishing era of human life on Earth. And I talk about that across many fronts, which like work and freeing us up from a lot of drudge work that doesn't dignify the human experience, and thus freeing us up to, ask ourselves the question, what does it look like for me to actually be applying myself in a way that's in line with my highest potential? Education and the fact it disrupts that centuries-old model of passive learning, because now we can get that information from a technology.
Yes.
So the classroom has to adapt to become more about application of knowledge and project-based learning and debate and dynamism. And I think that's very hopeful. In healthcare, personalizing medicine and giving us agency back over our own healthcare decisions and democratizing access to care at lower cost in a way that would be unprecedented. I talk about it with the climate. There's a lot of emphasis on the upfront or current energy demand of AI. And I talk about how that is true, but also that, early on in any tech cycle, there is much higher infrastructure cost to kind of build the foundations, but that also compute isn't as efficient as it will become. And therefore it's less energy and, it's more energy intensive. But that when we talk about AI, we talk about efficiency, and it makes us more efficient at everything we do, which therefore means energy saving. So the net dividend is going to be such that I think AI will be our greatest hope at addressing the current climate crisis. I actually don't think we can get ourselves out of the situation we're currently in without taking a bold bet on cutting edge tech. And I think AI can do that. So, and that's just a couple examples. And there's this, reawakening of innate human traits that we've waylaid that I mentioned in terms of intelligence. There's forcing global cooperation on an unprecedented scale because we've created this, other in the form of AI that if in the hands of bad actors or used wrongly could be an existential threat to humanity. So anyway, so many things. But
Indeed.
I really, really have a vision of what this could be. And some of us share that.
I believe you do. And it's certainly coming across in this conversation. I've written something about, looking at different inventions through the decades, through the centuries. And I think every single one that I could think of, such as the motor car, nuclear power, has damaged the environment. Every single one. But AI, as far as I could tell, was the only one that might give us a way out of the current problem. In other words, it does have a sustainability environmental overhead.
Right now, yeah.
Right now, for now,
yeah.
As it gets more efficient, that will dissipate as well.
It will. And the other thing about, I studied environmental science within geography, which my degree at Oxford. And so I'm very passionate about this topic. And I do think the other things that are hopeful, right, is everyone building in AI has a vested interest to bring down the energy cost of compute, right? So no one is going to be lobbying against this because it's a universal competitive advantage for them. So that's one beneficial thing. Whereas, in the past, when it comes to sustainability topics, you do have lobbies. And there may be a bit of that for, we don't want to go deep into the picks and shovels infrastructure layer of AI. But for the most part, that's the case. And yeah, as I say, some of the most promising applications of AI are in, for example, coupled with Earth observation space when it's, you use it applied to satellite data.
Okay.
And you can map the icebergs 10,000 times faster than humans can. You can spot illegal logging operations in the Amazon rainforest and then interfere in real time to stop it. You can spot methane, gas leaks in oil and gas operations, and these sorts of things, and also just smart infrastructure, making all our buildings more efficient, digital twins on city or planetary levels to look at climate patterns and weather patterns or heat islands and traffic and just better plan.
I love these examples because what it reinforces for me is that a lot of the debate at the moment is talking about chatbots and chat type interfaces.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, using it to create slides or documents or something, which is somewhat trivial in a way. But way before ChatGPT came out, 10, 20, 30 years ago, people were building models, trying to model the climate, forecast the weather, all those kind of things that have always been around. But for some reason, maybe to the frustration of some of us who are working in the area, that it wasn't in the news, it wasn't in people's consciousness. And now it almost is, to a ridiculous degree. It's almost become too prevalent in the debate, I think.
The negative or the positive use cases?
Almost both. Almost like if you have a business problem today, somebody in the room will say, let's use AI to fix it. And it's almost too much in front and center of what we're thinking in the workplace.
Yeah, I totally understand why people have AI fatigue.
Yeah.
Because it's just like you can't escape the term. And even when it's a bit, it's definitely overblown. It's just, we're very saturated with hearing about it absolutely everywhere. And it's kind of, so I understand that. But I also think the teams building AI for good or responsible AI or looking at these different use cases actually don't get enough press or focus. That's something I care deeply about, is providing a platform for them to be spotlighted more, because they exist and they care passionately, and they're using the best tools and technology that we now have to try to solve the problems of today for a better future. And they deserve more attention and more, I think, applause for what they're doing, versus the fear mongering. And it's not just AI that gets that though, right? Like all our news today incentivizes, if it creates anger or it makes people afraid, they're more likely to click and share and engage, unfortunately. So those are the stories that, stories are written now for that.
Actually, we often talk about human nature as being a positive thing, but when you say that and you talk about, things that make us afraid or scared get our attention more immediately.
Yeah.
Almost like human nature is a bit pessimistic naturally. It's like, because you're looking out for survival, aren't you, in the world? You're trying to survive.
Well, you are. And that's the thing about the brain again, right? Like the brain is an organ which its purpose is to keep us alive. Not to make us happy and thriving, but to keep us alive. So it's always scanning for threats. And again, it's like the amygdala, right? It's you see a shadow in the jungle and your brain will make you afraid of it because it could be some giant cat that's going to jump out and eat you, right? So that's the way the brain is wired. But I actually think our nature is like people want to feel hopeful and they want things to feel hopeful about.
Mhm.
But the way the news, well, in particular the news, but almost everything, right, in our social media age, in our digital age, it does kind of prey on our collective psychology, which is really a shame. And it's really unhealthy for us. The reason like scrolling on social media is so bad for you because you'll see some video where you're like angry and and it's upsetting you. And then you scroll to the next 7-second video and then you're crying because it's this very touching piece about, a war-torn country. And then you scroll again and it's like a dog befriending an animal. And it's so unnatural. Like our nervous system was not designed to flip through emotions so quickly. And our nervous systems were not designed to have the capacity to hold the problems of the planet. Like we were tribal and we cared about ourselves and our immediate nuclear family and then probably like the community just outside of that. But we weren't designed to be able to hold space for, the sadness of an entire planet. It's too much. And yet it's at our fingertips. It's literally in these devices we have in our hands. Absolutely wild.
I think it's made it too accessible. It's made it too easy and low cost to dip into all of these tragedies around the world. So let's dig in. Let's stay on the positive side.
Okay.
I want to sort of emphasize your phrase, AI for good. I think this is a phrase that people will be hearing more about over the next few years. Is AI for good is an idea, if you like, about saving the planet, using it in a constructive way, but also focusing on the positives and not just going out to make some cash, isn't it? It's about a more constructive, holistic, that's the word I keep using, approach to AI. And indeed, maybe if we see AI as the solution, we're missing something. Maybe it's just part of the solution.
I think it's just part of it, but it's a powerful tool. I always say AI is a tool like a hammer. And a hammer can be used to build a house or it can be used as a murder weapon. So it's really about how you wield it. And in my talks, I have this matrix of, present and future and positives and negatives. And I won't, anyway, you can look at the matrix maybe in those talks. But the idea is that either we can focus on the positives of today and we fear losing them. Right. And that's where most people go when it comes to AI. They're like, it's destroying industries, or like creative arts is one we were talking about offline, which maybe we'll dive into. But like AI is destroying these things we know and love. And therefore the future looks more dystopian as a result. And I think that's a very human axis to be on. Because again, it's the amygdala fearing the unknown and saying, oh, well, there's comfort and things that I like about today and I don't want to lose them. But actually the other axis is the opposite, right? Is that like there are a lot of very real negatives of the way we live today. And my view is that the way in which we live today is much more dystopian than almost ever before. We're lonely, we're disconnected, we're distracted, we talked about social media and all this inundation and noise and information coming to us from we're sedentary all day. We're behind screens. We wake up on a small screen. We spend our day on a mid-sized screen. We go home and chill on a big screen. We're disconnected from our physical bodies. We're disconnected from nature. Kids spend I think 9 times more time indoors than they do, or on screens than they do outdoors. I can't remember the exact stat. So there's a lot of negatives of it, plus climate change, war. I mean, like famine, layer on anything you want. And that other axis is let's take the negatives of today and let's solve them using these innovative new tools and technologies for a more flourishing future. And AI for good is just this concept that we've created a very powerful tool, or this technology's come of age and become very powerful and has the potential to help us address many of those things.
Thank you. That's really inspiring, actually. And I want to talk about people at the start of their careers, people maybe a little bit younger than us, and how they might be engaging with these ideas and looking ahead as well.
Yeah.
But I think that is really powerful. And what you've also spoken about in the past is this idea that actually you tend to end up, or the human race, we as a people tend to end up with the things that we imagine. You believe very much, it seems, in the sort of power of imagining where you want to go and visualizing that, and that somehow ending up being the way we end up going.
Oh, totally.
So if we're all sitting around being very terrified and afraid, it's going to be like a horror movie. But something you just said there, which I thought was really fascinating, was that actually today's world isn't that great. When I was we've had the pandemic. We're still recovering some industries from that. Some social aspects are still recovering from that. What are we afraid of? Why? This isn't perfect. So why are we afraid of it changing?
Just human nature. Because we can't fathom what we can't fathom. It's like staring into a void, right? It's the same. If you went back in time and asked a hunter-gatherer to envision the world of today, or you showed them like an airplane flew overhead, or you showed them a mobile device, they'd probably be like, that is the devil. Like, I don't want, what is that, right? So similarly, we can't fathom. It's like staring into a void. We can't imagine these industries that will rise. We can't imagine what human interaction looks like in future, what work means for us when the definition shifts again, as it has many times over our history. And so it's natural. Again, it's like the amygdala. We have a function in our brain that is designed for this, to fear the unknown. And that's why we're fearful, because it's the unknown. So it's very natural in a way. Yeah. There was something else you said. Oh, yeah. The concept, maybe I take 1 minute on this, like our collective focus is very powerful.
Yes, I do like this idea because it implies to me that we get what we imagine, we get what we deserve.
Well,
in a way.
Yeah, well, so absolutely. I talk in the book about this concept of hyperstition, which there's many other ways of, there's the Pygmalion effect, and there's, feedback loops. What's it called? Reinforcing destinies. No, what's that word called? Like when the term for, anyway, that we basically create what we believe.
Yes.
And you see it all over the place in psychology and science and economics. There's all these different, but basically the premise is that where we focus, our energy flows. And so, for example, the Pygmalion effect was based on this study done in education that teachers would tell certain students that they thought they were very high potential, and other students didn't get that same messaging, right? And so then the ones that were getting this reinforcement that they were super high potential actually ended up getting better grades or performing better, starting from a similar baseline. And you see it as well. In the world of Silicon Valley or in technology, when you ask successful builders, operators, or founders of these companies what inspired them, they often point to sci-fi novels. So they say, this sci-fi novel painted a vision of a future that didn't yet exist, but it gave them a vision to build towards. So they then started building technology based on that vision, that picture that was painted for them.
Yeah.
So our collective focus is very powerful. And then, people talk about manifestation. You can get more spiritual in terms of the language around it. But if we spend all our time focusing on and imagining these doomsday scenarios, and in that kind of cycle of fear-based messaging and fear-mongering and doomsdays, we are much more likely to end up in them.
Yeah.
And so for me, I talk about a lot of the real risks of AI in the book. But for me, the biggest risk is that if there isn't a grounded counter vision and counter narrative that is hopeful, then there is no hope. That's where I'm coming from.
I think you're painting a great picture that is hopeful. Let's talk a little bit about early careers, people at the start of their careers, because that's where my day job has been for the last sort of 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So helping people into tech roles in particular, but also business roles as well. My perception of people in their sort of early 20s today is that they've grown up with an iPhone. They're very versed in technology. Maybe they've got a bit too much screen time, as you've talked about. They've not been allowed to play out in the woods unaccompanied at the age of 7 and 8 like my friends were. We were in mortal danger on a daily basis, and we figured out we didn't watch much telly because there was only 3 channels.
Yeah.
So I think they're more aware of what technology can be and how it can help them, and they use it to shop and all the rest of it, and sell their secondhand clothes. But the world of work from that perspective seems a little bit more challenging perhaps than it was for me. It feels like there's a lot of question marks over what work, and especially office work, will look like.
Yeah.
Have you got any thoughts on where that might go in the next year or two, or even advice for those behind us? They're going to be delivering your vision here.
Well, if I was coming of age into the world of work now, I would be absolutely terrified or angry I'd be feeling big feelings because they are walking into the unknown, or they are kind of being forced to take roles or enter career ladders that won't exist in the same way in a few years' time, right? So they have this almost dissonance of feeling like, I understand why they don't want to do it, why they feel like, there's something not right about it, or it doesn't really make sense. I truly believe that generation coming up was designed for a world that doesn't exist yet. They're designed to build the world we're moving into, which looks nothing like what came before. So of course they're resistant towards these structures and norms and corporate culture, and they have no interest in it because it won't exist in the same way. And they're meant to be the builders of what comes next. So I really understand almost on that like spiritual level where they're coming from, is this like reticence and friction that they feel. Because they're still having to operate in these old structures and systems,
Yes,
knowing that they're not going to be here for long. And for sure, I experienced that when I was in consulting and as a manager. We had the new generation kind of just stepping in with totally different values, things they cared about. And by the way, much better at setting boundaries. I don't know if you find this, but it's like, and that creates tension too, because some of us, myself included, did work really long hours and burn the midnight fuel and bend over backwards and say yes to things we should not have said yes to early on in our careers. And so as a result, we now, we're more senior and we're placing those expectations on the new generation coming in, and they just say no. They're like, no, I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have the bandwidth. And the first reaction is like, what? Well, if you say no, then, but I did my time and you have to do your time too. There's that reaction. But I would always then step back. And my second reaction is like, well, they're right. They're actually right. Like they're onto something. And I'm almost jealous that they're setting boundaries that I never did. And so who am I to get frustrated? I can be frustrated. That's my human response. But they're also not wrong. This is so interesting. This big cultural shift happening in the workplace right now.
It really is. And I think the workplace as we know it is obviously changing as well. You've had sort of fractional roles in the past, and there's much more of a feeling now that people will not necessarily be self-employed in the old way, but they will be more in control of their working week and do more work for more than one company, or maybe start something with a friend or do a bit of teaching. Could be a different kind of thing in the evenings. Maybe that their working time is more spread out and they're doing more than one job at a time.
Portfolio careers.
The portfolio career,
as you call it.
That seems to be coming through much more now.
Yeah. And if you look at all the future of work reports from World Economic Forum or any other, they anticipate gig economy will be on the rise, flexible career portfolio careers, people having multiple sources of revenue. And also that maybe you operate within, I won't say corporate, but a more kind of classic professional context for some things you do. But that people will more and more, because the workplace being so disrupted, every industry is being so disrupted, we're almost forced to ask ourselves this existential question of like, well, okay, if I'm at high risk of losing my job or career in the way that I thought it would be defined, okay, what actually lights me up then? What am I actually passionate about? What does it look like if I was to step into my highest potential? People are forced to ask themselves that question. And then they may just start it as a sort of fun side thing, whether it's gathering people or bringing people back into connection with nature, or it's teaching, or it's something more artistic or creative, or who knows what, but they'll start it almost as this mini aside.
Yes.
In the time that AI and technology frees us up to have, for better or for worse. And so that will be interesting. I don't want to downplay. The job transition is going to be massive. There's a lot to navigate, skills, uplift, capabilities, ensuring people have the right capabilities and literacy, AI literacy moving into the future. But I think it's also hopeful because the modern way that we work is, again, pretty dystopian in my view.
Yeah, for sure. I think that there are things to be cautious of, and there are risks out there. But I would always say to people that you've got to be involved. You've got to get into it because it's not going away, right? Some people think, and there's cases through history of this where people think if you ignore a new idea, it will just disappear again. And things don't get uninvented, in fact. There's no way to go back. So
Yeah.
I would recommend to people, if they were thinking of where should my career go, how do I get started in the world today, is embrace it as much as you can. Really educate yourself about what it can do, what it's not so good at,
Yeah.
and really get stuck in.
Yeah, for exactly the intersection of your industry or the area that you love with technology is a good starting point to understand how the technology will impact or influence your industry and how you can position yourself for that. But also, as we were talking about earlier, I think that all of this spurs a return to more human ways of doing, being, and operating. So similar, like if we ground it in an example from the creative arts, where people thought that the radio would completely demolish live music, right? They were like, well, no one's going to go see people live anymore because there's now this thing that's the radio. In fact, two incredibly hopeful things happened instead. One was that live musicians it was a democratization of their reach. Like they reached entirely new audiences that they never could have before. And so they got better known and their platforms grew and their reach expanded. And the second was that actually then live music came at more of a premium. It became it's a very special thing.
Yes.
Now, when you went and experienced something live and you're appreciating in a way that maybe you wouldn't have before, right? So it just, again, there was the fear.
Yeah.
Something we love today is going to disappear and the world's going to be worse because of the radio. And in fact, it expanded reach. It was a great thing for musicians and for their livelihoods and their careers. And it made it more special to do the real human act of experiencing music in person.
I like that you picked the radio in particular.
Yeah, because we love music. So
Well,
we were like, how do we get...
we want to get talking about music.
Yeah.
But also, I think just sticking on the spoken word, I think the podcast is the evolution of radio. You know, I think of it as an audio mechanism mainly.
Yeah.
I think radio is still alive and well in this form. But yeah, we do want to talk about music. I spent the last year or so writing about music, reviewing music, and getting to know some musicians, particularly independent musicians, so not necessarily major label, enormous artists. And they're finding it difficult, not only on the streaming side, but also on the touring side as well. Touring isn't paying as it used to do.
Right.
People seem to be a bit
Unless you're Taylor Swift and it's an Eras tour.
That's the thing. Some people know how to do it. You know, it is possible.
Yeah.
I think with any example we can think of, there are some people making money.
Yeah.
But I think...
But in general,
it does seem to be harder to get started in any industry, but in particular, the creative industries, whether it's writing or performing. You are more active in music than I am. You sing and you play music, whereas I just listen to it and write about it. So
both valuable. I would say you're
thank you.
just as active, just in a different way. Maybe more active, because mine's still kind of this side bubble in my life that maybe will grow, but we'll see.
I see it as a side thing for me at the moment, but it is active. So one of the things I like best about it is going to a live show. The smaller shows, you can meet the artist, talk to them for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You can review it. You can get your little video for TikTok on your phone while you're there. It's a much more humanist experience than going to Taylor Swift, where she's a little speck on the horizon.
Right.
Or worse, you're watching Taylor on the big screen at Wembley, even though you're in the Wembley Stadium.
Yeah.
So how important is music to you? What are some of your experiences with being a participant?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was saying to you before, as I'm, this platform or whatever, the intersection of humanity and technology topics, the more people I'm meeting who are in this space, it also happens to turn out that they're deeply and wonderfully musical. And I haven't quite figured out why that is, but it doesn't feel accidental. So watch this space. I don't know what, and we were talking about, is it because we're shifting from an emphasis on kind of matter and material to energy, which is another, and musicians understand energy and frequency and resonance and sound and so maybe it's something to do with that. But anyway, I digress. Me and music. I come from a very musical family. We always joke we're kind of like the Von Trapps. Every year we host this big Christmas tea party and we all put on a concert and we all sing. I consider myself musical, but I mostly consider myself an entertainer in every sense of the word, right? And music's part of that. And I do love to sing. And I taught myself the piano in lockdown. And now that's my favorite way to accompany myself. And then I started, like, I moved back to the Bay Area after 12 years in UK and France. And now I've been gathering people either in more intimate, open mic type environments, or this new initiative called the Marmalade Project, which is about creative community building events and gatherings. So we do one-day choirs, similar to Gaia Collective, if people have heard of it in New York. We stole their idea. It's basically secular choir gatherings, you know?
Okay.
Because the power of sound, like when we come together and sing, is so powerful. And if you look at almost every society, culture over time, and especially like in, you know, these ancient practices of coming together and singing or chanting or doing something with our voices. And it was very powerful, and it was really woven into the fabric of how we celebrated or ritualized certain things. And we don't do that anymore. I mean, either you go to a concert, but then you're kind of an observer who maybe is singing, but it's not really about your voice. Or you get it in religious contexts, like church and things like that. Otherwise, you don't really get it. So we wanted to bring that back.
I think that in-person thing is really interesting. So last summer, a friend of ours introduced us to an idea called pub choir, which is a very specific brand globally now.
Okay.
There's an Australian contestant on The Voice or X Factor or something like that. She was a singer herself.
Yeah.
But she realized that, like you were saying, there's power in singing, even if you're not that good at it or you haven't had much experience of it. So the pub choir experience that we did last August, basically there's 1,000 people in a room. You pay for it like a show, but you're the singer.
Yeah.
And through the hour or two, she teaches the whole crowd how to sing one song.
Yeah.
We were doing the Cranberries.
Did you do an arrangement, like different vocal parts?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
like
the guys were in one part.
In a beautiful way.
And then the higher voices were in the other part.
Yeah.
And we all had different bits of the harmony. And I cannot sing at all, but it sounded really good. And then you get a video back at the end to watch.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of this
just
exact
a couple
format.
of hours, yeah.
And it's powerful. And you know what? I saw a video recently with all these ICE protests that are happening in the US.
Yes.
There was one video that also went viral of this protest group singing to ICE. But it was kind of beautiful and hopeful. They were singing like, "You can change your mind" or something over and over. And it was this beautiful invitation that was like rooted in love. And I really think the power of sound, there will be, I mean, we're understanding it or something. Like there's a lot of darkness in the world right now. You see it all over the news. There's war, there's conflict, there's narcissism, there's ego, there's these Epstein. I mean, you know, I don't even want to go into the details of any of it, because I feel at the end of the day, there's either like the frequency of fear or of love. And it was so beautiful that at a protest that is protesting all this darkness and fear, they used song and like loving song as medicine. Like that was the antidote. And the cure was not to engage more in the fear and the hate, but to create light and to amplify light and love through sound. That to me, I saw that and I was like, yes, that is the way, is to go like gather and dance and sing and love harder. And Bad Bunny also said it in his acceptance speech, since we're talking about music, at the Grammys when he won Best Album, which was just like profound moment. And by the way, that album to me is a masterpiece. It just gave me complete shivers listening to it. But in his acceptance speech, he said, "We don't hate them." Again, talking about ICE, right? He said, "We don't hate them. We love ourselves and our communities harder. We love more and we are full of love. You know, it's not about hating them. It's about embodying our own love and light so deeply that it becomes a counterforce to that." And I was just, this is just so deeply promising to see people tuning into this.
You hope, or you tend to see that the good side wins out in the end, even if it takes a little while. You've talked about Bad Bunny. You've talked about that music being slightly unusual, maybe, in some, almost like a world music kind of influence behind it. So maybe these tools, the future that we've got for us, just allows more voices and a wider spectrum of people to be heard. Yeah.
Well, what we were talking about is exactly this. You were offline. We were also talking about the impact of AI in music and how, you know, it could be, people feel hopeless about it because it's sort of, we're inundated with this now AI music that all sounds the same or whatever. And I was saying, well, but music already the music industry has become more and more narrow as artists are forced to try to conform to this sound that's popular and will get played on the radio. And so you hear a lot of artists talking about how they've had to step away from what feels really authentic to them, or that they're not allowed to make it because their record or their label, there's this pressure to conform. And I think, like, with Bad Bunny winning Album of the Year, that album is so local in a way, right? Like, he's weaving in the sounds of Puerto Rico, the voices of Puerto Rico, the instruments, there's this native deep rootedness of the music, which is really remarkable. And I find something so promising about that yes, maybe AI inundates with doing all the kind of bog standard, this kind of conformist sound, which will force artists to then say, like, what really matters to me? Like, what is in my integrity when it comes to the art that I want to create? And how can I tap back into that? Because that album resonated with people deeply, and me included.
Yeah.
And I've never been to Puerto Rico, and I don't, but it just tugs on the heartstrings because it's so authentic and it's so in integrity. And anyway, the last thing I'll say about that is, like, again, it's like this tuning fork analogy that authenticity is the highest frequency. And like, when you are creating something or speaking something or singing something that is in complete alignment with who you are, you get that like amplification of the way, there's no noise interfering with it. You just have this amplification of the sound, which is powerful. Versus when you're trying to squeeze yourself into something that isn't quite right, that can be felt. The energy of that can be felt. So
that resonates with me in terms of my personal life and professional life, actually. I think that you've talked in the past about leadership as well. If you're an authentic leader who just does what you believe is right, that other people pick up on that. I think that's even more so with music, where the whole purpose is to evoke a feeling and to transmit emotion through the air, shall we say, or through the internet, perhaps. But you're trying to create something that you believe in the hope that other people will respond to that. And I think I picked up there that maybe the Bad Bunny genre is not something you might have chosen, but the authenticity just comes through so strongly.
Yeah, it just pulls, it just calls to you.
It brings you in.
Authenticity is really, it's a value I hold very dear, but it's true that when someone is being deeply authentic, it cuts through all the noise and you feel it in your bones. You feel like, I can trust this message, and you don't know why, right? It's not something you can kind of quantify really, but it's felt. And that's why I think it's energetic. It's a frequency of it. And it also, I just spent a few weeks in Costa Rica over the holidays, and I was meeting these people who, again, were deeply just in touch with community, with nature, with their own body, and their lives are designed around that. And their voices, when they speak about these things, you realize the wisdom they hold without ego around it.
Yes.
And those voices have not been amplified for a long time. And I think the time is coming. Like, we're going to see the rise or the return of these, more human ways of living that they've continued to embody kind of quietly, aside from our very skyscrapery, noisy Western focus. And the time for those voices to rise, for those people to rise, for them to tell their story, like Bad Bunny's doing on his album, is coming. I feel something very powerful there, which we've yet to see. But it's just, again, I feel it in my bones.
It's really exciting. You've talked about Lily Allen's new album. That's being very successful for similar reasons, I think. She's just put it out there, whatever she felt in the moment.
Yes.
And people have responded massively worldwide as well.
Yeah. West End Girl, it's a similar story. Very different topic, but like, she just got to a point where she thought, I don't give a crap, and I'm just going to say what I want. And she was angry, and righteous anger can be this incredible force, right? But of course, what happened to her, you can feel that she just thought, screw it. I'm going to tell my story. And it's so authentic, again, this authenticity point, that it awakens something in you, and people hear it and they relate. It's resonating whether or not it's their story, because it's a honest, in integrity human story. Yeah. So there's something happening
There is. So we've talked about music.
Yeah.
As we get towards the end of this conversation, I can't believe we're getting to the end already.
No.
But we need to talk about humor because in particular,
Yeah.
my music writing caught people's attention because I was trying to put some humor into it. And I don't mean jokes, just a humorous look at a song or a way of presenting themselves or whatever it was. It was something that, especially an American audience, found very unusual in a music writer. It was something that other people were not doing.
Yeah.
It's a British perspective on some very American music, but the key to it all is humor in there.
Yeah, and British humor is
Dry,
fabulous.
sarcastic, British. You're perfectly positioned to critique British humor. So you spent many years here.
Yeah,
You sound like an American.
I do.
How is our humor different, or is it that different?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think Brits are, this can maybe controversial, but I think they're funnier because they're
do.
just, I mean, like humor is just for better or for worse, but they are very funny and they don't take themselves seriously, which I find hilarious.
Mhm.
Americans tend to, I mean, this is a big blanket statement, but they tend to be more earnest.
Yes.
They're really kind of like, yeah, I care about this and stuff.
Yeah.
And Brits are sort of have this irreverence, like, I don't, and I think that's quite funny.
I have to agree. I mean, I'm
But
from
it's
the
personal,
north.
it's subjective, yeah.
As you know, you've got family members in the north of England. I'm from the north. I think especially in the north, there's a dryness. There's a sense that we really don't take ourselves seriously because
Yeah.
as soon as you start doing that, you lose authenticity, actually. I think if you look at the world, the state it's in, our place in the universe. Are you familiar with a Monty Python song, the Universe song, where he talks about how enormous the universe is? It's a jokey,
Gosh,
it's
no,
Eric
but
Idle.
I love Monty Python. I
It's an
wish, because I
Eric
could
Idle.
start singing it now.
I will send you the link.
Okay.
It's an Eric Idle song, and he's singing about how enormous the universe is
Yeah.
and how irrelevant we are in a very funny way.
Right.
And I think that's a very northern way of looking at things. It's very much, popping the bubble, pricking the balloon. It's like the ego goes out the window,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just about having a laugh. And in the north especially, we cracking jokes all the time
Yeah.
about everything.
And it's also, it sounds frivolous, but humor is deeply important. There's a book called Humor is Serious Business, and those authors are my idols because it's super, the same way we were talking about singing to ice, right? And singing light and love in the face of fear and darkness. Laughter is the same. It's an antidote, it's a medicine, it's a connective force, and it serves a very important biological purpose.
Yes.
And so you can't underestimate it. Same with play. At one point, I got very fascinated by the psychology of play. And we play as children, but we lose it as we get older because we condition ourselves out of it. But humor and play are incredibly important. And the other reason we're talking about it is like, for me as well, as you're saying with your writing, humor is this important device. I consider myself an entertainer, and humor is one of my skills. And so when I'm being funny, I'm in integrity. I'm in authenticity. So my signal's amplified when there's humor involved. And so again, it's just fascinating exploration, but humor.
Well,
Yes.
there's something honest about humor because it's very difficult to fake a laugh. If you're laughing, right?
Yeah.
And the same with music. If you don't like the music that you're listening to at the moment, you can always listen to something else. But also, it's you don't get to choose your response. You either find something funny or you don't. You can't pretend that it's funny.
No, and this is why humor is the perfect blend of IQ and EQ in a way. Because in order to be funny, as you're saying, first there's the IQ portion. Like you have to be sharp, witty, responding to your environment, what the other person's saying, churning it through, figuring out how to respond. And then the EQ piece is that humor doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in context. So I'm only funny if I'm being funny, that you think I'm funny. And so I need to understand what might make you tick, what you value in order to be funny to you or to the audience I'm speaking to. So it's a most incredible blend. And I actually respect humor. If someone is funny, I respect that almost more than any other trait that they might have for that reason.
I do not disagree. Humor's been something that I've looked for in films that we watch, in books that I read. You talked about science fiction. There's people like Douglas Adams who specialized in comedy science fiction.
Yeah.
And comedy detective stories and so on. Yeah, it's the most entertaining thing you can do. I think horror is one. We've talked about the dark side and the challenges and the fear. Horror plays on that genre plays on
Yes.
that. But I much prefer humor, comedy.
Yes, that is such a good point you're making, because it's true. Humor makes topics accessible to people and it invites them into it. And so, especially when talking about something like AI, which is can be very technical and can be, again, feel isolating. Humor can invite people back in
Yes.
to that dialogue and
Yes.
feel like they can understand it.
When you say it like that, it makes me think of song and music. Music and song and humor seem to be on the light side, the positive side
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah. Very critical roles they will play as we move into this new era of human life on Earth.
Well, we'll all have so much more time to do it, won't we?
Well, that is the hope. That's the hope. Exactly.
So as this conversation draws to a close, I'd just like to give you a chance to talk about the book that's coming out
The
in the next
book.
few months.
Yeah.
So you've been talking about these topics for, well, I saw the first talk in August, so it's getting on for 8-9 months now.
Yeah. Still young, still baby in it in a way.
Still growing. I
Yeah.
think you've got other book ideas. You've got this idea for a podcast or a platform around it maybe as well.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
Yeah. So the book, I mean, it's called The Case for Hope in the Age of AI, and it's set to come out in the spring, which I feel is a good time of year for hope, you know?
Absolutely.
But also, and related to all these topics we've been exploring, I do plan to launch a broader platform around it called The Case for Hope, and to uplift hopeful voices, topics, potentials, and create a platform for those. So not just around how we interface with technology in future, but also, as I said, like restoring us to deeply human ways of being, interacting with the natural world, ancient wisdom practices and traditions, and those knowledge holders, and amplifying their voices, and just restoring us to those lost forms of intelligence. So I'm excited about it. So yeah, I think there'll be a podcast, and I'm kind of crafting it all now. So we'll see how it pans out. But this is my passion, my purpose, my mission, my raison d'etre is to flag bear into a more hopeful and flourishing human future. And so I'm excited for all of that to continue.
And you're doing this internationally as well. I believe your next stop is to be a judge on a hackathon.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're
Tell me
going to the
about that.
Philippines. Yeah. So I met this amazing team, and they run something called Developer Camp, amongst other initiatives. But this hackathon in the Philippines is exactly this perfect intersection of what we've been discussing, because it is a tech hackathon, and a lot of it will be like tech for good or AI solutions, but they're inviting locals. So it's kind of like, builders or entrepreneurs from the Philippines or Manila ecosystem. And so it will be very much rooted in those local needs. What do those people need? What are their pain points? How do we use technology to solve for those? And throughout the agenda, they're weaving kind of cultural exposure and dialogues and
Yes.
discussions with local people. So it's like the perfect blend of all these things we've been talking about. And I'm excited to join them in that. So I will be over there for a bit. Yeah, I'm kind of becoming a global citizen in a way that feels really rich and nourishing.
You seem to be having a lot of fun doing it. And I think that the hackathon idea is such a cool concept anyway, because it brings in elements that we've been talking about, the play element, the competitive element.
Yeah.
It's kind of meant to be fun, but you might end up with some solutions and some workable prototypes after it as well.
Yeah. And I love that it's, again, a lot of the people building an AI right now are just, they want an immediate go to market, or so they're building an enterprise AI, but there's not a lot of soul in it. And so I love the idea of working with founders and to be able to encourage them, like, how does what you're building contribute to a more positive human future? How are you considering the ethics of how you're building this, the data privacy, the security, like to really start from that place, from ground zero, design principles,
Yep.
and work with them to build it in that way. For me, that's the future. Those are the teams I want to work with. They're the teams I want to back, teams I want to invest in, get other people to invest in them. Like that is really where it's at for me.
Well, thank you very much. I am inspired by this. I think it's been a fascinating talk. We talked for about an hour before this.
Yeah.
We could probably talk for another hour afterwards. But I think we've come to a natural close point. So I will say thank you to Tallulah Merle for joining us today.
Thank you, Paul.